Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Lowdown on Low Code podcast. It's an exciting time of the year, the holiday season. Rob, my co-host, has joined me in his festive outfit, and this is going to be our last podcast as we head into the holiday season. But for me personally, super exciting episode. This one's been a long time in the making. Pleased today to have the current head of product for Nintex, Niranjan Vijayaragavan, joining us on the show. As many of you know, I have a storied history here in the company, and I thought just as a special treat, because Nintex is going through a bit of a rebranding exercise at the moment. It's the possibility engine, and Niranjan, you've got the latest T-shirt on, and so I thought I'd just unveil a little bit of the past and the present to give us a comparison point here. And but I could probably fill an entire podcast. It's 12 years ago now, almost a little bit longer, nearly 13, that I joined Nintex, and it's a company that looks a lot different today than it did back when I joined. It's an industry that looks a lot different today than when I joined. There's mega titans have come into the industry in the form of ServiceNow and Microsoft and others. There's startups pop out of the woodwork every day. Now we're told that AI and agentic is going to transform everything, and who knows what it means to be low code or process anymore. And so, Niranjan, I'd love to just kick this off by hearing a bit about your background, where you came from in the industry, what got you excited about the opportunity to work at a company like Nintex, and how it's going writing this next chapter of the story. I think for the folks that don't know, obviously on the outside, Nintex kind of always thinks of itself in these chapters from the origin story down in Australia all the way through to today. And so you're responsible for that next big chapter. And so just love to hear a bit about that journey.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. It is exciting to join the podcast, especially with folks who are very familiar with the industry and have a lot of history with Nintex and with the domain. My background, I grew up as an engineer, worked for AMD and then Microsoft in a business school, and then have had various product and engineering roles. Started with B2C marketplaces at Expedia, quickly transitioned to B2B SaaS. I did a few more B2B SaaS stints, and then what got me excited about Nintex is, like any product person, you fall in love with the problem, and that's what happened here as well. I think that's kind of the highest order bit. The challenge of solving automation at scale is super exciting, and I think the ability to unlock the developer in all of us, especially those who don't know how to code, is even more exciting. And then you marry that with the assets that Nintex had built over time, the sponsorship from TPG, and the culture of the company really made me join the mission. And like you said, it's an exciting chapter. We are enhancing or rewriting the chapter as we sort of foray into the AI world of automation. And so that's what got me here, and I'm excited every day to bring new cool things for our customers and partners.
Thanks for that, Niranjan. That's really it's great to hear your background. And just by way of sharing, I know we've shared a little bit of this on the podcast throughout time. I mean, my introduction to Nintex was back around 2007, 2008 as a SharePoint add-on. This was when I was an analyst at Forrester, and I stayed close to the company up until my retirement just a couple of years ago. And it's Christmas, as Ryan mentioned, so this will be our last show before Christmas. And I have a little tradition every year at Christmas time. I read A Christmas Carol, and I just picked it up last night. And it kind of occurs to me, I've got like the ghost of Chief Product Officer past and the ghost of Chief Product Officer present with me here on the call. And so, Niranjan, I'm going to start with you. So when Ryan came to Nintex, there was this kind of vision. He was starting up at the time with Nintex Workflow Cloud. I think it's Automation Cloud now.
Yeah.
And there was a series of acquisitions that supported that, but it was all sort of in this spirit of end-to-end automation, draw to bring in document generation. Also, I think that was to bring you into the Salesforce ecosystem. Crayon and AbleSoft kind of to inject that RPA in, e-signature, and others, ProMap sitting over the top of it to kind of give you that business process optimization mindset throughout your organization, give you kind of that roadmap for automation. And so, in my mind, it was this increasingly comprehensive platform that would drive, end-to-end automation opportunities, and then, eventually take Nintex further and further up the scale. How is that compared to the vision today? It's been a while since I've had an update. Where do things stand, and is the Ryan vision still in play?
Yeah, I think the story continues. It's probably there's a few different sort of leaps in the process, but like you said, many of the acquisitions have accrued towards the sort of the larger platform vision, which is how do you bring an end-to-end automation platform for a customer and enable the entire solution in place. We just finalized our latest acquisition, which is Squid, which squarely brings us into the experience domain, which is how do we build low-code applications that rounds out a lot of the process underpinnings, and on top of business logic can live very, very sophisticated and engaging applications. So as we sort of look into the future with these assets, I think there's like three shifts that we see. One is orchestration moving from very deterministic procedural processes to more nonlinear, non-deterministic, which is what AI brings into the picture. I think customers are also the second piece that I'm seeing is customers want, instead of going to vendor A for RPA, vendor B for business process automation, vendor C for low-code app dev, they're looking for something that satisfies the entire solution. And then the third piece is like, how do we not be historically, a lot of the business process orchestration capabilities are seen as glue, right? So you've got 50 different SaaS applications, still things are not working. And so can we bring something that ties it together to actually building full-fledged solutions all on a single platform? And our belief is with AI and with progress in low-code tools, our strong assertion is the future of organizations is not going to be buying 50, 60 different SaaS applications. It's going to be to build, because building is so much easier now, is to build in platforms like us, their entire business operations. You may still have some of the core systems like CRMs and ERPs, but the rest can easily be solved within the low-code platform. And so that's kind of the vision that we are driving towards. And a lot of the acquisitions have sort of accrued towards that vision. And right now we are in the process of bringing that platform together, infusing it with AI so that we can drive that. And so we have started to think about the platform in sort of three key domains. One is, as you're building the solution, you need a good grasp of what is happening and what you need to go automate. And so we call that the identification bucket, which is, can you identify your processes? Can you identify your data models? Can you identify the interfaces that people need to actually go build? The second piece is the orchestration layer, which is, are you able to orchestrate both at the task layer, but at the coordination layer as well, which is systems and human processes across workflow, across repetitive tasks and documents, which is where a lot of the DocGen, RPA, and workflow capabilities come in. And then can you overlay that with a very powerful engagement and experience layer, which could be apps, could be forms, could be chatbots, as chatbots sort of take on a life of their own as an engagement forum. And all the assets that we are driving towards sort of sit in these three buckets. Can you identify what needs to get automated? Can you build the orchestration and business logic? And can you overlay with that with a powerful experience layer?
So Ryan, ghost of Chief Product Officer past, is that consistent with the vision that you had in mind? And how has this progressed? And what are your thoughts?
I was wondering if you're going to break that one up. Yeah,
we know
sure.
Too much about each other.
I know for sure, and like the dirty little secret here, like Niranjan and I catch up occasionally and talk about some of this stuff, right? But which is for me super rewarding, right? I 4 or 5 years almost since I left the building, I still care deeply about the franchise and the people and the customers that use it. But like you, Niranjan, I came to the space to for the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives and help them leverage this technology. And I think a big part of it, Rob, to your point, the start of the journey, we literally went from having, DVDs with MSI files on them that you installed on servers to the cloud, which was, when I joined, that in itself just felt like such a massive leap. They're like, we go to the cloud and we do what we did in SharePoint, but now we do it everywhere for everyone. Like that was sort of that first jump. And then as that started to bed down, and at the time I thought that was a big enough vision, right? And then as that started to bed down, I'm like, wait a minute, there's all this other stuff happens around us. And so, and the telltale sign back in the day was sitting down with Niranjan, to your point, the partners, right? Say, okay, how do you get started with an Nintex engagement? Like, well, we break out Visio, we diagram the process. Right. Like, okay, there's something in this. And then, okay, what do you hand off to your clients at the end? There's a set of documentation, there's how-to guides. And so that just sort of cracked that door open to, we've been so focused on this one spot. What happens from here? And I think, most recently, the big piece for me that got me excited about the company's journey was the Squid acquisition, because at the end of the day, go back to 2010, our UI was SharePoint.
Yep.
And when we left SharePoint, not left, I should reframe that. So there's people out there who think we left SharePoint, never left SharePoint. We started to evolve where SharePoint's one thing, right? Yeah. And we knew we were losing that UI, and we knew we were going to have to bring it back. And, strangely enough, it then took 10 years to get around to that, right? So that ability to draw people in and make it a destination, because for a lot of people, process is just hidden in the background. Yep. So that part really excites me. And then, Rob, to sort of really round out the answer to your question there, just this ability to look at that problem space and to your point, find these processes, document them, start to prioritize them, kind of classic product manager exercises as you think about the apps you might build, the solutions you might put in place, go through building it, analyzing it, did it deliver the results, can we drive improvements, and full circle. I think that's the key part of it. And now, of course, okay, without getting into further questions we might ask here, but then now and plus AI, right? So what does all that mean?
It's also very parallel to software development, right? Like you start from requirements, and then you have a back-end layer that orchestrates all the logic, and you have a front-end layer that drives engagement. It's a very similar concept. You're just building it for the non-developer crowd, which
right.
Reason
you're democratizing. You're putting it in a visual metaphor. Hey, Ryan, quick question for you. Did any particularly bright analysts that you ever worked with ever recommend the acquisition of Squid? I don't know. Just wondering, but like every time we had advisory.
You know how it is. Like we tell people, like the reason it's analyst relations, because you build relations and you pay attention to what they tell you. That's the answer to that question.
And the next thing you know, you've got a company going.
Yeah.
Hey, Niranjan, you made a comment earlier. I think it's really interesting. We're actively watching the maturation of this space, right? So it's been really cool for those of us who are old and have been around. Like Ryan was this really young, good-looking guy when I first started.
Tenured is the right word, not old. But yes,
but he's wearing a shirt that's 10 years old, 15 years old. All right, so we've seen this space mature, right? We've seen some larger vendors move into the space. We've seen, and along with maturation, we see verticalization, we see horizontal solutions coming to bear. And one of the things we start to see, and I think it speaks to one of your comments earlier, Niranjan, is we're seeing a shift in the build versus buy equation as those prices, as it gets cheaper to build something custom to your needs. You also mentioned the orchestration of processes that run across multiple back-end systems. That's always been sort of the realm of process orchestration. You guys are getting into this a little bit, through your marketing materials. We start to see you getting more and more into the application space. Tell us about that and how deep are you going?
We are going all the way to package solutions for two reasons. So one, obviously you need a platform where you can build, and gives you the flexibility to build whatever you want. But as you all know, the benefit and the bane of having a platform that can do everything is you have to show what it can do. And so, and also our focus into mid-market makes it very germane to bringing solutions to companies who don't have a lot of, IT resources or technical resources to bring to bear, and would love to see something that is somewhat baked that they can go customize. And so, the two-pronged approach is obviously the platform that can deliver any solution is core to this, but then you go from there into partners who can build these very specific business solutions for customers. And then we can also demonstrate the art of the possible by building some of these and taking it to market. And what we've seen, we just launched our first version of that with a licensing and permitting solution for state and local governments. It's gotten a lot of traction, and especially with partners, they're trying to build on top of it to augment. And what that does is it actually encapsulates what the power of the platform is for the customer. So maybe the first entry point becomes that solution, and then they can use that same pattern to build out other things using the platform. And so that is our thesis. It's going to be a little bit of a learn in the market and iterate on it, but it actually serves two purposes. One is the go-to-market motion in being able to bring these solutions to market, but it also informs the platform on what capabilities are needed to truly build this more.
Right.
So it actually serves both purposes. And in fact, my team has a solutions team that builds these, that actually brings back capability requirements back into the product team. So it works really well for that purpose as well.
It's hard to do, right? I mean, I think in the movie The Princess Bride, didn't they say never match wits with a Sicilian, never start a land war in Asia? And if you're a platform company, don't start building applications. But that being said, your logic is sound, and you did come from a packaged application background, so I'm sure you understand all those eccentricities. Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's funny because the product person in me. Like this has been, in the industry, we're thinking about this for a long time. And, the Burley who we've had on the show, K2X, Nintex X, Coney, he transformed Coney to solution-based company, right? And so product person in me is like, oh, I know 101 things that you have to do to really crank this, right? And I love that feedback loop you're talking about. And I think the thing that interests me the most, because licensing and permitting, surprising probably no one, in state and local government, it's go to crusty old website and download PDF and fill in and scan and blah. And so I like it because it's like it's horizontalish. It's a horizontal vertical solution, if that makes sense, right? And so it's like got broad applicability.
It's a version of case management, right? Like
that's yeah. So it's perfect for that. So now,
but our DNA will always be the platform. Like we are not going to become a licensing. We are known for licensing and permitting, right? Like these are proof points that mostly inform the platform. The real scale comes from partners.
Entry points, sharp dick entry points.
But it's a good, it's a good one because it's actually, I've seen other vendors in the space pick things off. I mean, like a classic one's like, hey, you can use us as a CRM. I'm like, woof.
Yeah.
That's a competitive landscape. Whereas if I list the number of like hyperscale licensing and permitting SaaS providers, it's not a big, it's a good place to go because there's not a lot there, right?
I mean, you guys know this. Almost every SaaS application, or maybe 75% of them, is some variation of a database, a complex business logic, and UI. There's views, tables, etc. You can bubble down almost every SaaS application to these three things, which is how software is built as well. And so why not, right? Like when you have the capability to address all three, why not show that vision?
It's funny. There's a startup I advise, and when they first showed me, it didn't take me long to distill it to that. And then I'm sitting with the CTO going, if you would allow someone to extend the database schema and add their own properties and then put in some more advanced process around this, that'd be really cool. So taking this now a step further, because the two things happening. One, a lot of this sort of focus on replacing SaaS apps and rationalizing cost. And the other is, where does AI play a role in that? So, at Nintex, we started back in, it must have been like 2015, 2016. We started the AI thinking. And again, like a lot of people, there was only so much was possible. We had some interesting experiments around converting PDF forms to electronic forms. And yes, I know, right? Super, super popular one. And then, but you sort of then you leapfrog that, and Nintex, like everyone, I guess you've done the, hey, I'd like a process that, I'd like an app that, whatever. what Rob and I, we sort of prod all the vendors on this. Like, what we're really interested in is like, okay, that's sort of almost table stakes now. So what's Nintex got in mind beyond that? When you start the agentic conversations coming up, deeper predictive insights, and everything outside of, yes, we made our text box,
Yeah.
type ahead for you. Where's your thinking on
That's
that?
a good question. Look, I think in these days, the answer is AI. You have to find the problem, right?
God, I hope not.
The answer is always AI. So we think about AI in our platform with three personas in mind. So one is the builder. First and foremost, we are a build platform. So how can AI help with the building of things, which I think you alluded to a little bit, is the nirvana of that is, can you actually infuse AI into the SDLC process on a low-code platform, which is start with the requirements. How can AI help you bubble down requirements? And some of the capabilities we've launched with process capture and the ability to capture what is happening in an organization, use LLMs to actually describe it into a requirement and get to a good sense of what processes are running, what data models are people interacting with, what kind of user interfaces are being touched, is super interesting, because any good software or solution is only as good as the requirements get. So that is one area still in the design phase. And then you've got the prototypical, can you create a full application using AI, which is for us.
Yeah.
I think the individual pieces are easier when you're saying create a form or creating a workflow, etc. But how do you orchestrate this across multiple domains? Like you need to create an e-signature package, a document package, etc., and connect that, is where a lot of the agentic AI comes into place. And how quickly can we reduce cycle time to build something? And then once you build, that's not the end of the story, which is then how do you test? How do you make sure, can you create test cases using AI that actually validate what you're trying to do, and also build reporting using it? So that's kind of the design time. It's all sort of catered towards the builder persona. Are you helping the builder build faster and more powerful applications?
Yeah.
But that is a powerful but a very short-term use of AI, because once you build it, it's out in the wild running. And so the real, I think, use cases for AI will come into, can you actually equip the builder with AI constructs for the end users that'll get used again and again and again? So this might be chatbots on the solution, or some kind of worker functions like, summarize your text, or here's your bot that can do underwriting of loans, etc., etc. So there's a plethora of very domain specific and more generic agents or workers that you can inject into the solution, and that needs to be in our design canvas, maybe pre-curated, or we give the ability to build that natively in the platform and then become part of the solution. So that's for the more of the end user persona. How do you actually drive end user benefit using AI? And the third part is the stakeholder portion, which is insights, intelligence on how things are going, recommendations on how to improve things. A lot of work to do there, but I think there's a huge potential for AI to understand what is happening with the applications that have been deployed, and suggest, and maybe even in the future, auto remediate some of these things, so that your AI application combined with your design agents is almost evolving as it's learning, right? I mean, that would be super cool, where
holy grail.
The builder doesn't have to do much, right? And maybe they're just clicking, saying this looks good, go for it. So I think that's where we are headed in terms of how do you make this easier and easier and easier to build as well as manage. And I think the manage portion of it is equally important, because that's what is happening on a day-to-day basis versus the build happens for one time. Yeah.
So Rob, switching it up, maybe GTM has always been, a strong point for Nintex, particularly, anchoring in massive ecosystems like the Microsoft ecosystem, building a, hugely globally diverse partner ecosystem. But Rob, thoughts on that side of the business?
I just have one more thing I have to share, just because I think it's. I don't know if Niranjan's going to pick up on this, but Ryan's definitely going to pick up on this. So back when K2.5 and K2 Cloud were launched, and
K2 questions.
No, it's not a K2 question. It's just an observation. It's actually a personal observation. I think Niranjan will get a kick out of it. So we worked very closely with their chief technology officer. Was actually just loved working so much with Olaf, and he was. Because he was just the most candid human being in the world. And he had this vision of, we're doing the cloud now. We're going to have a lot more data. If we can actually commingle the data and start to extract some information from it, we can start to give people insights into how to build a process. It's hard to build a process, right? If you've never built one before.
Yep.
But now we have the cloud, and we can start having. It was he was talking about a co-pilot, right? He was talking about what we call today a co-pilot, something that's that over your shoulder. And I'm like, how did that? Olaf, and now that K2.5 is out, or K2 Cloud is out in the wild, how is that going? And Olaf says, in such an he goes, not enough data. And so, but
we had enough.
Brilliant. And now and we're working with data fundamentally in a fundamentally different way. Hey, let's switch.
We had enough data for sure. We had enough data at scale.
We have enough data, and we don't need as much data as
people are actually now holding back. Like, data has become such a critical topic with AI. Not that AI was not exposed before, but now people are really concerned about where it's going. So the space is going to get interesting on how much data actually ends up being in the cloud versus actually locked up.
How aware of you? I mean, back in those days, Olaf was really clear. We would ask people whether we could anonymize and commingle their data in order to discover patterns. It feels like we're slipping away from that, but that's probably,
people have been anonymizing and hashing these things forever. It's not changed. I think the attention to it has become so much more now.
Yeah. And I think sort of the, maybe the overreaching into, how much are we anonymizing and how aware are we that we, are buying into an anonymized model. So, switching gears a little bit, it is a crowded market out there. We've talked about the maturation. We asked this question of, all of the, the senior vendor folks that come in. Look, there is an ideal customer that out there. There is something that you have built to serve. A Nintex account exec just walks into a deal. They've heard what the deal is about, and the tail is wagging. He or she says, "That's our deal. That's what we're here for." It may not be competing against Pega, and it may not be competing against Microsoft. What is it that is your sweet spot?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we have several ICPs, but if you were asked me to sort of nail down one, we recently had I can't name the customer, but mainly in the food and beverage distribution landscape. And they have a use case where they use a tool, somewhat of a maybe SaaS-ish tool, to actually do driver qualifications, right? And they spend a lot of money on it. It's clunky, etc. And they basically asked us, once we sort of shared all the capabilities the platform brings to bear, can you actually solve this? Can you build this on the platform such that we don't need to use it? I think that's the quintessential deal for us, which is mid-market, not CRM-ish, ERP-ish sophistication, but very specific, domain-specific SaaS applications that brings to bear the need for an application, a fairly robust and complex business logic underneath, and the requirement to bring together a few different systems that you can deliver as a solution to a mid-market customer. And there's many variations of this, like mid-market banks doing loan processing. There's variations of that, but that's what I would say is our sweet spot.
Right.
It's a hard one. It's funny. I've just the last month or so I've been in a bunch of ICP conversations and presentations and the classic get more focused, get more targeted. And so it's interesting because you even just started where you're okay, within an ICP there's multiple ICPs, and I was like the sub ICP, and just when I saw the other day, it's anyone from 1,000 employees to infinity, and I'm like, well, that's not that focused. Do we maybe need to scope this down?
And it's also, I think it betrays the complexity of organizations and where visions live, right? Because historically there was a very clear distinction between business runs the business and all technology happens in IT. That's no longer the case.
Yeah.
So you need a technical audience, but a technical audience could live anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
that's the challenge with it. And especially as you say, like, if you look across the set of capabilities, the novel thing now is, to your point, you're seeing this trend towards people want to buy all these things from one vendor as
Yeah.
opposed to disparate parts, but equally the buyers are quite often different. So then it's this hierarchy of people, complexity in the sales cycle, but the more you understand that, the easier it is
Yeah.
to pull them all together. So one interesting thing on the go-to-market front, a long time ago we were selling, Nintex was sold by the server license, right? In an era where it was, did you sell by server or, a number of procs in the server? And, we always prided ourselves in not being greedy on that front, right? Some of our competitors are like, oh, you've got like a multi-proc. So we kept it simple,
Yeah.
9995 a server,
Yeah.
swipe your credit card. And then we moved to the cloud, and that obviously wasn't a thing anymore. And we went back and forward on the different models, and there's been evolution of that over time. Now, all the talk in the industry is around this, the idea of paying for outcomes. And we actually, funnily enough, like, I was looking back at some notes, personal notes, since like 2013, 2014 era, where we actually toyed with this idea, right? Because we got to charging for a process, but we're like, but not all processes are the same.
Yeah.
So do you start to look at what's
Yeah.
happening within it? And so how do you think about that? As everyone talks about, oh, agentic, I pay for how many leads this thing processes or how many loans this thing underwrites. Like, is that something that Nintex is noodling on at the
I
moment?
think we will go towards that. I feel the fundamental shift between AI and, I guess, non-AI is you're moving from deterministic to stochastic, right? Or probabilistic.
Yep.
When you're deterministic, the measure of success is very deterministic as well. So what Nintex has is pretty close to an outcome-based pricing right now. You finish a workflow and you get charged for it, because finished completion of the workflow is a deterministic process that you got an outcome on, and that is success, right?
Yep.
So right now our pricing model, unlike other players who are being very user-centric, is very consumption-based. So you finish a workflow, you get, that's how our pricing model is, even for adoption, for workflows, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think as you move to AI, there's a little bit of a probabilistic outcome. You create a form. The form may not be exactly what the user wants, and so they may not use it. Or you ask a question, the answer may not be exactly what the user wants. So you have to then contrast against what is a successful outcome versus what is not.
Right.
And so as more AI comes into the picture, we will move towards more outcome-based pricing. Like Zendesk has, like, okay, how many successful answers were actually accepted, and then you get charged for it. And that'll be the right incentive model, because it'll also drive the software builders to become more effective versus just making sure engagement is there, that the outcome is there. And it'll also drive more adoption from customers of AI. So I think that's something we are looking into as AI becomes a standalone pricing scheme. It hasn't yet. There's outside of Process Manager, which is its own capability set. We are not yet starting to charge for some of the AI generated assets. Right now we are mostly focused on adoption, but as that becomes and comes at scale, we will start looking into more outcome-based pricing.
Makes sense. So Rob, maybe that's a good point to pivot to use cases, right? Because if you look at that consumption-based pricing, then the success of the business largely comes down to, and success for the customers is how many things they solve. What are your thoughts there, Rob?
Well, first off, I just keep listening to this cost conversation around AI, and I keep going back to something that you said, Ryan, that you brought to bear, which is it's a really expensive way to solve some simple problems that we see.
In many cases, yes. So if you actually, in fact, I've talked to so many folks about agentic AI, especially with process orchestration. You don't want to use an agent if it's a very deterministic input-output statement.
If you want to get a jail, you probably might not want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so yeah, earlier I think we all laughed, Niranjan, you made a comment about, everybody, AI's the answer. Just tell us what the question is. And it's like, God, I hope not. Right. So, thing number one, what Ryan will often bring up with our clients when we're talking to them is if you've got a simple, cheap workflow, don't replace it with AI. Number one, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Number one, it is an expensive way to solve a problem. Number two, have you given full consideration to a probabilistic outcome and where it's acceptable versus where you need deterministic outcomes? And I think we're so overhyped on agentic right now, and so there's not quite enough knowledge in the market of where and how probabilistic outcomes can get you into trouble. So
where is the right use of AI? Where do you have a probabilistic problem to actually use AI versus make the AI first and then make it a probabilistic output, which won't be the right outcome because now you're introducing, like you said, more cost to a very simple problem.
Yeah, there's going to be more and more that Analysis.tech is thinking about this, and we'd love to pick your brain on this later. But this, and I'm just like, I'm not the brightest bulb in the shop. Let's be honest. That's why I had to go become an analyst. But the idea of stringing together agents for orchestration seems to be so poorly understood and so deeply risky, not only from an execution perspective, but from a transparency, opacity perspective, from a regulatory perspective, so many issues. But another topic for another time. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Niranjan, give us a sense of the scale of Nintex. Where are you working? I mean, one of the things that always impressed me about Nintex, and this was even before the number of acquisitions, was just simply the number of customers you had. You had made your way into a lot of enterprises, a lot of organizations. Can you give us a sense of the scale and where?
I can give you a ballpark, obviously not specifics, but we are in
whatever you can share.
We are in the tens of millions of processes a month, probably like mid-tens, and that translates into many of our other document generation capabilities, workflow, app dev is picking up. So that's kind of roughly the scale where we are operating. There's obviously a huge distribution there. There's many customers who are running citizen services on our platform, which drives a lot of scale. And then there are somewhat smaller players who don't have that many executions. So it's a wide variation, but on average, that's what I would say is what we see from a trending perspective. The other thing I would say is the growth on the platform has been stellar. Like we have seen high double-digit growth year on year on our cloud products, which is fascinating. Some of that is driven by the on-prem to cloud move, but there's also a lot of organic increase in processes among customers that we already serve.
It warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it?
It means
Ryan?
it did something right. Yeah. It means it did something right.
That was your idea.
In fact,
Ryan.
It was the bit where it was the conversation. Yeah. It was a conversation. I had a funny discussion with our good CEO John Burton back in the day, and he's like, when he first came on board, looking for more details on the business case for the workflow cloud, and I was like, because we have to. I mean, if you want, I could go off and do a lot of deep research on this, but we have to, and so it's good to see.
Alex always sends me every month the chart, and I mean it's just stellar to see how many workflows. The growth rate in the workflows is amazing.
Yeah, so I think. So, one of my favorite conversations, Rob, that one of my other favorite analysts, because there's a couple of them.
Third favorite at the highest.
My third favorite analyst.
At the highest, yeah.
Janelle Hill from back in the day at Gartner, and she dropped this priceless line one time in a meeting with our exec team and said, "You guys are great for nuisance processes." And half the room took offense. I'm like, this is awesome, right? And Niranjan, it speaks to the scale you're talking about. There's many people out there who set about solving the biggest, scariest, most complex processes for people, Pegas, Appians, that sort of thing. And at Nintex, we very intentionally went after breadth, right? And so for me, a successful customer had 500, 1,000, 10,000 processes automated on the platform. And I don't care if they ran once a year or a million times a year or what have you. Like, so obviously you've alluded to a bit of that's playing out, continues to play out. But when you look in that space, because one thing is, okay, there's all these sort of nuisance processes, the what I like to call the oil in the engine, right? But equally in there, you'd see these gems where you're like, holy cow, someone's actually running their business on this platform, right? Like, can you give me a sense of, what are a few of the really cool things you've seen in your time?
I mean, I've seen, like, you probably know this, like, there's such a wide variety of very fascinating use cases that people use it for. Some of the things that I would call out is, I mentioned citizen services. There's a country that is running their entire citizen services on our platform. That's just so amazing, right? Yeah. Like, it goes down, like the whole...
the country stops.
There's secret service agencies that are actually building, we don't know what, but that is also very fascinating. Is okay, they use the platform to do something which is so enigmatic, and it's fascinating. I think my personal favorite, and I think I talked about it maybe a couple of months ago in a different setting, is nonprofit that is trying to do stem cell or automate stem cell donations. So they're trying to solve for donor matching for blood cancer patients. And you hear these use cases that really sort of gives you more purpose than you already had. And they've tried to almost shave off 40 to 50% of the donor match life cycle using the capabilities on the platform, which is very, very fascinating. So that's my personal favorite, but there's a plethora of use cases, and it's not all oil in the engine or nuisance processes for sure.
So let's go back to my favorite topic, A Christmas Carol, as we kind of start to close out. As we know, A Christmas Carol, Dickens gave us a happy ending. We're all pleased with that. So back to my two chief product officers here. Niranjan, starting with you, let's go out a few years and tell me what Nintex is going to look like, both from a product roadmap perspective and a company perspective.
Yeah, I think, look, I'll just reiterate the mission, right? We want to make sure that mid-market organizations use us as a platform to automate their business processes. So a new organization should look at, here's what we are doing. Let's bring on Nintex and build all the things that we want to run. I think that to me is the 2-3 year North Star, that they are not going and spending millions of dollars buying, piecemeal SaaS software to glue something together. And there's a lot of benefits to that. There's obviously cost savings in doing that, but there is, if you think about when you're buying 50, 60 things, you have to solve for permissioning in all of these things. You have to care about where does the data live in all of these applications. You have to make sure that now you're integrating these in a consistent manner. Like, all that headache goes away if you build on a single platform. And so there's a lot of intangible benefits in this idea. And the only bottleneck that I see is the ability to build fast and in a customized way, which with low code as well as AI is largely getting solved now. And so that's where I would like to see Nintex be, is in the mid-market space. Like, every customer is using us to run whatever 60, 70% of their business processes built on the platform.
Platforms can be a beautiful thing. So at the end of A Christmas Carol, if you ever watch any of the movie versions, they always cut to the ghost of Christmas past. And he's smiling. Are you smiling, Ryan? Is your vision in good hands?
Yeah, I think it's in great hands. And Niranjan just name dropped Alex Burton there. For those who don't know, he's a long timer. He predates me at Nintex and still there and still carrying the torch along with a whole group of great people, especially still down in Melbourne there, cranking out the good stuff. I mean, I think to me, you look at the discussion we've had here, there's a future out there where back to Niranjan, your point, and we've talked about this, right? Like low code vendors kind of solved the build your thing part of the problem, but they didn't solve the whole life cycle of applications that we know from the world of coding. And so I see that future out there where you just you have broadened the capability of the Nintex platform, but now it's like the infrastructure around it to take care of everything. You mentioned things like testing, like
Yeah.
the industry is kind of hopeless at testing, honestly. Like, I give us all like a C minus or something on that, myself included. I think there's a lot of improvements can be made there. I think, you talked about helping people sort of build a better app, but it's like, make the app better and more usable for the people you give it to. So there's so much can be done there, and I'm excited to see where that goes with the platform. And I also think, out there on that horizon, we will have to contend with this Rob, you and I, we can be the grumpy old man and be like, we're agentic, and we do, right? But at the same time, it's a thing, right? And we've seen some really interesting examples of vendors who are figuring out how to blend the two. I think there's this fascinating opportunity, Niranjan, obviously, for a company like Nintex. Is like, look, we've nailed the deterministic stuff. So how do we help the deterministic engine understand where to go probabilistic, or
Right.
vice versa? How do we help the probabilistic agent go, I think there's like a simple, cost-effective, cheap process over here that can do this for you. Like, I'll hand you off to that. And so it's kind of cool to see where that goes. So look, Niranjan, super appreciative of your time today. Obviously, it's easy for me to geek out on all things Nintex, and so this was a pleasure. Before we wrap up, is anything else you want to share? Anything? How can our listener base be of help to you and the rest of the team in driving this vision forward?
Yeah, look, it's been a great conversation. We just rebranded. Here's our new brand. The platform is going places. It can solve a ton of problems. So come check out our website, reach out to us, talk about your problems and how we can be of help.
Fantastic.
Well, appreciate your time today, Rob. It's been great catching up again and cranking out another episode.
Yeah, great to have another episode. Folks, again, as Ryan mentioned at the start, this is us. This is it until January 6th. We take off a little bit for the holidays here. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, whatever you may be celebrating over the course of this time period, please. I hope it's wonderful. If you'd like to engage more, find out more about us, we've got lots of research, and you can engage with any of the good folks at analysis.tech. Easily to find us. Find us at analysis.tech. And with that, we'll see you all next year. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks, folks.